Welcome back to episode 136 of the Guardian Project podcast. I'm your host, Andy, and I am rubber, you are glue. Whatever you say, wild ricochets off of me and sticks to you.
I like that. That's a great card, too. I really, really, really enjoy that card.
Play it more, people.
And I'm your other host, Mike, and there really is no limit on how you can build a Morophon deck. No, really, Morophon's boundless. The limit does not exist.
The limit does not exist. Thank you for the Mean Girls reference there.
I love Tina Fey, so I'm a big fan.
Please listen carefully.
Big fans. And this is the podcast where we talk about all things Magic the Gathering.
But mostly Commander.
So a few announcements. We're back to streaming. So if you have not yet followed us, please go follow our new Twitch channel. That is at twitch.tv/Guardian Project Podcast. We're going to be streaming every other Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So probably about 3 hours. We try to get 2 games in. So we've got a lot of folks that you've seen before on our show scheduled over the next couple of months. And we're going to be putting those VODs on YouTube. And Coyle did say that he is going to edit one of those videos. He said, we're going to,
this year,
he goes,
summertime.
Hold me accountable. At some point, we're going to edit one of those. So,
for sure.
That is, if you're not following us on YouTube, go follow us so that you can be notified when those videos go live. What we did before was we would upload those videos on Sundays. So that is going to be our same goal, is to have those up Sunday mornings. So folks have time to watch those as they want, as they please, I guess, or when they want. And Sundays have been pretty good for us in the past. So please go follow us and also come hang out with us when we're streaming every other Tuesday.
Yeah, you'll check us out next time on January 25th will be the next time that we're streaming. So make sure to come in and check us out then. If you ordered anything from the October Super Drop Secret Lair or the Secret Lair Extra Life 2021, you should be getting some emails from Wizards of the Coast saying that you're being charged. If you didn't already purchase them outright beforehand, you're going to get charged soon, and they'll be shipping soon. I know I got my notification about my Secret Lair Stranger Things and my Secret Lair Extra Life, so I'm really looking forward to sticking those humans in my Morophon's humans deck, and of course that Craterhoof wherever that Craterhoof can go.
I didn't order everything in the Super Drop, but I ordered the showcase, the Midnight Hunt foil edition of the lands that were from Innistrad. So things like the Moorland Haunt, Vault of the Archangel, Desolate Lighthouse. I went through, and I think of those, I think there's only like 2 that I don't play. I don't run Grim Backwoods, and I don't run the Nephalia Drownyard, but I believe I run all of the others in the 2 color decks that I have. So I'm pretty excited for these to come in. I forgot I ordered them, I'll be honest, till I got the email.
That's fantastic. Is that Backwoods card? Is that the sacrifice one with a Golgari activation in its
it is the Golgari one. I don't know what it does.
2 green and a black, tap, sack a creature, draw a card, I believe.
Yes, that's exactly. And it also taps for colorless mana. Also comes in untapped, folks.
It's a good land, so automatically.
It does have sacrifice a creature. Honestly, I don't know why I'm not running in Draw Golgari Lichlord, I guess, because I could at least sacrifice a creature that's going to get removed.
That activation cost is the same as the cost of your commander, though, to be fair. It's pretty...
No, the commander's black, green. This is still colorless.
But it's 4 mana, though, to activate it. Versus,
that's true. I mean, to draw a card, though, where I don't have a ton of card draw in that green-black deck, most of it is trying to throw it in the graveyard. So,
well, there you go. You found a home for it now.
I found a home for it. The other announcement we have is that if you have not heard, our merch store is live, where you can head over to guardianprojectpodcast.com and you can pick up one of our play mats. They are $30, free shipping anywhere. We're very happy that we're able to do that. We did know that some people had issues purchasing a while ago. Those issues have been resolved. And then for those of you that have ordered, those have been shipped out. They were shipped out last week, so they should be there pretty soon. And if you also want to get a playmat, but support us to get other swag like the proxy of Guardian Project or some of our dry erase tokens, you can head to patreon.com/Guardian Project Pod. You can donate for any dollar amount, but we do have a tier that will get you a playmat plus all the other goodies. So go check that out.
And if you're looking for another way to support the podcast, whatever platform you are enjoying the podcast on now, if you could subscribe, rate, review, and leave comments, we would be most appreciative.
Yes, and you can find us online at theguardianprojectpodcast.com. We stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/GuardianProjectPodcast. Our social media is on Twitter at GuardianPod, Instagram at Guardian Project Podcast, and then YouTube at youtube.com/TheGuardianProject. If you ever want to email us, you have a question or you want to suggest a topic or something, you can email us at guardianprojectpod@gmail.com. Coyle, what are we talking about this week?
Pretty exciting week. We get to talk about another patron deck. So if you're not aware, and if you're not already a patron, there is a patron tier where we will take one of your decks and we will take a primer of your deck and we're going to break it down and have an entire episode on it. So you're about to hear that. A patron deck for our patron Daniel Oni, who's bringing us another Lorehold commander. We seem to be getting a lot of those from our patrons. And this one is Hofri Ghostforge.
Hofri Ghostforge. I think it's time for us to go and forge ahead. It was going to be Ghost Forge ahead, but I did in fact miss that. So it's Go Forge ahead. But that was a good transition.
Yes, it was.
So let's start out by talking about Hofri Ghostforge. Hofri is a 4/5 dwarf cleric that costs 3, a red and a white. It says spirits you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. And it also says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types, and has, when this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to your graveyard.
Yeah, so this deck is really going to care about that secondary ability on Hofri in order to create a token after one of your creatures dies. It's going to focus a lot about self-sacrifice, so you don't have to depend on swinging and your opponent's blocking or you blocking your opponent's creatures to have your creatures die. And as you can probably imagine, it's actually going to focus on good both enter the battlefield triggers and death triggers. So as we've said before, we like to get some sort of primer from our patrons. We're actually going to do this in a little bit of a different way. And I actually broke the primer down that I was given from Oni, and we're going to go section by section and talk about the deck that way. So first up, from Oni, this deck is based around creatures with good enter the battlefield abilities alongside utility creatures that can be used multiple times due to Hofri's ability. So when you cast your creature, you're going to get your enter the battlefield trigger. When the creature dies, you're going to get your new token and you're going to get a second enter the battlefield trigger. So you're getting double triggers of your enter the battlefield creatures. The second the token copy of that Hofri makes is only going to be 1/1, but it's going to get pumped by Hofri. It's actually going to get trample and haste in some cases. These creatures are actually getting bigger and stronger with their token copies. But
that's fair.
And it also works for death triggers too. There's actually one particular card in the deck that I love more than any, and why not start with it? And that's Cavalier of Dawn, because it has both an enter the battlefield and a death trigger. So we're actually going to get double of each of them using Hofri's ability. So Cavalier of Dawn is a 5-mana elemental knight. So for 2 white, you get a 4/6 with vigilance. That says when Cavalier of Dawn enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token. And then when Cavalier of Dawn dies, return target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. So it can only actually target 3 creatures in this deck, but it says artifact or enchantment. So really, I guess the purpose isn't to bring back creatures, but 3 of the creatures in this deck are artifact creatures that you can bring back. No enchantment creatures, but there's also a lot of utility and high value artifacts and enchantments that we'll go over in detail later, such as Anointed Procession, Martyr's Cause, Panharmonicon, and Phyrexian Altar, that this is going to be able to bring back. But I wanted to start with this because it really shows exactly the power that Hofri is going to give you. You're going to get double the ETB and double the death triggers.
Yeah, I think that these types of decks that are focused specifically on the commander are becoming more and more prevalent. You and I both have a lot of experience
For
with
sure.
commanders that are built the whole deck is built around the commander with Noyandar, with your Shirei deck that deals with death triggers, mine deals with just casting spells. The deck really, really functions when Hofri's out. So we're certainly going to focus on creatures that matter when Hofri is out. The next section is that the deck was built in a way so that they can combat early game haymakers with a decent amount of removal, which comes really in the form of creatures, sorcery, and instants. So there are creatures that have self-sacrifice, like Cathar Commando, which is a 3/1 human soldier for 1 and a white. It has flash, really great, and it says pay 1, sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Again, we've mentioned with cards like this sitting out, people hesitate to play a good artifact or a good enchantment, so you're able to get around people playing a Smothering Tithe or a Cathar's Crusade or a Ghostly Prison, what have you, because they don't want it lost. Where in this case, you can sacrifice this creature, destroy it if they already have it out, or they don't have it at all. You play it, and you're going to get a token if Hofri's out, and you can also sacrifice that token. So you're getting double. I love this card.
Yeah, fantastic. And if you look at it, it's 2 generic and a white mana to destroy an artifact or an enchantment. And it is at instant speed because of the flash. It happens in 2 steps, but it still works. Bounty Agent is doing something similar. So Bounty Agent is 1 and a white. You get a human soldier 2/2 with vigilance that has tap sacrifice Bounty Agent. So you have to get around summoning sickness, unfortunately for this, but destroy target legendary permanent that's an artifact, creature, or enchantment. Normally, like in standard or in modern, any other 60 card format, maybe this is too specific of a card to go for a legendary permanent, but we're in Commander and everyone's playing with a legendary in the command zone. It doesn't hit Planeswalkers, but I'm guessing that 99% of your games have at least 1 legendary creature played in them. You're not hopefully playing against 3 Aloro decks or 3 Grist decks in every single one of your pods. So hopefully your Bounty Agent will be able to kill it. But the added benefit is the token copy actually comes back as a spirit, and Hofri grants it haste. So that actually does get around the summoning sick part of Bounty Agent's tap ability.
Yes, legendary themed decks, worst nightmare right here in Bounty Agent. Niambi Esteemed Speaker, get wrecked.
Oh, yeah.
The next card here is a card from Eventide, Duergar Hedgemage. It is a 2/2 dwarf shaman that costs 2 and then a hybrid red or white. And it says when it comes into play, if you control 2 or more mountains, you can destroy a target artifact. And when it comes into play, if you control 2 or more planes, you can destroy target enchantment. So in the deck, we have 9 mountains, 11 planes, and then you do have a Sacred Foundry, so I guess it's 10 and then 12. So you have a good amount of both. Chances are you're probably going to get at least one of those. And if you have both, you're going to destroy 4 things, I guess, if you have a sack outlet and can get rid of it right away.
Yeah, and it's really fantastic. I've never heard of this card before this deck, if I'm being 100% honest. But then again, I started an Amonkhet, so the whole like Evening Tide, Morning Tide sets were a little bit before my time. But Duplicate...
Time after time.
Time after time. But Duplicate definitely is a card that I'm extremely familiar with, and you also see it here in removal as a creature. So Duplicate is a 6 generic mana 2/4 shapeshifter artifact creature that has imprint. When Duplicate enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-token creature. It does not say non-token creature that you control. You are definitely using this card to exile your opponent's creatures. The second line of text isn't that relevant when you're using this card as a piece of removal. As long as the card exiled with Duplicate is a creature card, Duplicate has the power, toughness, and creature types of the last creature card exiled with duplicates, and it's still a shapeshifter. But this is a 6 generic mana, exile someone's creature in this particular deck, and you're still going to be able to sacrifice it, bring it back. 6 mana, it might sound pretty high, but the fact that this is generic mana means your Soul Ring is going to help you cast it early on, and it's gonna work early game to take out either someone's commander or someone's really powerful creature that they put down.
Right. And we're also in the red-white color combination here. So we know that card advantage, while we are getting more and we are seeing some impulse draw, we're getting looting effects. Sometimes you just need a full new hand. We're running a Magus of the Wheel here. So it is a 3/3 human wizard for 2 and a red. It says pay 1 red and a colorless, tap it and sacrifice Magus of the Wheel. Each player discards their hand and then draws 7 cards. In this case, when that Magus of the Wheel dies, if Hofri Ghostforge is out, you're going to get another Magus of the Wheel. It's a 1/1 that also has haste, so you can then pay 1 and a red and sack that one if you would like, and wheel again. If you didn't like the new hand that you got, and if you have enough mana, which is totally possible, getting a lot of mana in this deck, you can discard, you can wheel, play out a few things, and then wheel again, just get another new hand before anybody else gets to take advantage of the new spells that they cast.
That's fantastic.
Or that they drew.
In my mind, I see a situation where everyone else only has 13 cards left in their library, but I have more than 14, and I'm about to make everyone draw from an empty deck with a double Magus of the Wheel trigger.
Yeah, that's pretty cool too.
Hopefully it actually happens that way and not just in my brain. But there are a couple spirits here that actually have some self-sacrifice ability that are amazing utility. The first one here is Remorseful Cleric. For 1 and a white, you get a 2/1 Spirit Cleric with flying that says sacrifice Remorseful Cleric, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. Now, I am a big proponent of I hate graveyard hate, so hate on hate.
And I love graveyard hate, so love on hate.
But it's a super good card, and in fact, we did have the pleasure of recently playing against this Hofri deck, and yes. At one point I had to exile a card from a graveyard, and there was these giant creatures in here, and of all the creatures I could choose, I said, I don't want my graveyard exiled. I got to take the 2/1 spirit out of your graveyard. That's what I had to choose. It kind of felt bad, but at the same time, from Oni's perspective, I'm sure he said, well, that thing definitely did its job then.
Yeah, if you're just presenting it sitting in the graveyard as something so terrible that you had to remove it so that it wouldn't get reanimated to get sacrificed, it in fact did its job by pulling that removal spell from you.
Huge. Now, the other spirit I was referencing is Selfless Spirit. So Selfless Spirit, also 2 mana, 1 and a white, and you also get a 2/1 Spirit Cleric with flying that has sacrifice Selfless Spirit. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. I remember when this particular card was in standard and I hated it because I couldn't destroy things. In this deck, it is so good. Better than I thought when I first saw the card in the list, because it actually gives you one-sided board wipe protection if you want. So by sacrificing Selfless Spirit, and it coming back, you can actually stack the triggers so that your token will come back before Selfless Spirit's ability resolves, giving the token copy of Selfless Spirit indestructible as well. The fact that Selfless Spirit is a 2/1, actually, and it comes back as a token, it'll still be a 2/2 with Hofri 2. So it's actually not really decreasing its power much at all. And when we start talking about the removal sorceries in this deck, you're going to see how many board wipes we have in here. And that's the whole one-sided board wipe is you can, cast a board wipe, sacrifice your Selfless Spirit, give your board indestructible. And now everyone else's stuff is destroyed except for yours. Hopefully your stuff is all spirit, so it all has haste and you can swing out and try to win.
Yeah, Selfless Spirit's a really good card. I think it's played in a lot of places. I do like, though, that it's just a generic spirit here, so it's already a 3/2 with trample and haste.
Yeah.
So you can play it during combat, swing immediately to get the advantage of having that, and then board wipe on your second main phase. And you didn't have to just board wipe and then lose it. It had haste, so I like that a lot.
3 damage is relevant. It's a lightning bolt, right?
3 damage is relevant. And then last, but not least, we have an elemental incarnation. So not a spirit here, but we have Solitude. This is a 3/2 flash lifelink for 3 white that has, when it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 other target creature. That creature's controller gains life equal to its power. So that same thing, Swords to Plowshares. It's an instant for 1 white. You can exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. But it also has an ability for evoke. So you can exile a white card from your hand. to instead cast Solitude for free. It enters the battlefield and you have to immediately sacrifice it. But when it enters, you get to essentially exile a creature that is problematic. This is pretty cool because you can exile a white card from your hand, exile a creature, and then when it dies, it comes back as a 1/1, and then you get to exile another creature.
Yeah, and there's even an extra step right in the middle with Evoke. So Evoke is actually a trigger that goes on the stack. So if you do have a sacrifice outlet where you can get mana or mill cards or something to your advantage, you can actually sacrifice Solitude before the Evoke trigger resolves and get some extra value that way. But just by itself, for 0 mana, you get to exile 2 creatures. That's insane. It's really good. So
moving on, we have instants and sorcery removal now. So not on a creature, but the first one here is a card that I have not played with, but it just came out within the last year, which is a Rip Apart. It is a sorcery that says choose one. It either deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, or has destroy target artifact or enchantment, and it costs red and white. I like modal spells. Great solid option.
Yeah, fantastic. This next removal spell is a spell that I like to play in every single deck that has red. I think it's red's best removal spell in my opinion, and it's also very fun because people get to maybe get a free random card, and that's Chaos Warp. Chaos Warp is a 3 mana instant for 2 and a red. This is the owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. Technically, you could target your own stuff with this too, but just the fact that this is like a mono red, quote, destroy target permanent, and then you have to pray to the magic gods that permanent doesn't show right back up.
Yeah. This one, the next one is another removal spell in white. Isn't as fun, but it deals with elephants, so that's kind of cool. It is Generous Gift for 2 and a white. You have an instant that says destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. I like this specifically in this deck because, one, you can use it to destroy a permanent that is problematic for you that your opponent has, but in some cases, maybe even removing one of your creatures with a better enter the battlefield ability is more valuable. So, if you have an artifact and an enchantment that is problematic and you have Duergar or Hedge Mage, you might rather destroy your own creature and then get its enter the battlefield ability. So you kind of, you also get your creature back if Hofri's out as a 1/1, and you get an elephant, and you got your end result of removing the problematic thing, or a Cathar Commando or a bounty agent,
For sure. We've even alluded to the fact that you might see a card called Anointed Procession in here later, which is going to give you a second elephant and a second of whatever creature that you just destroyed with your Generous Gift. So
yeah,
awesome removal spell. The next 2 removal spells are actually going to be very common. You've probably heard of them. Path to Exile, a 1 white instant of exile target creature. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle their library. And Swords to Plowshare. We mentioned already when we talked about Solitude. Swords to Plowshare, a 1 mana white instant that says exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. Just very strong 1 mana instant exile creature removal.
Yeah, the next card here is one that actually I think it might have been the last 2 times as well that we did a deck tech. Wear and Tear comes up a lot, and I'm so glad we see this. So again, we have an instant. It is a fuse card. So you can pay 1 red and a colorless mana to cast Wear, or you can fuse it and pay 1 additional mana to play Tear, which is 1 white mana. I guess you can also just play Tear if you want. But Wear says destroy target artifact for 1 and a red, and Tear says destroy target enchantment for a single white. So I guess if you pay a colorless, a red and a white, you get to destroy target artifact and target enchantment. I like having these cards. Targeted removal for enchantments and artifacts remains very important in the decks that I have been, or I guess against the decks I've been playing against.
Yeah, especially targeted enchantment removal. In my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I could have used that this weekend a few times when there were cards out that were just causing issues. I mean, Smothering Tithes alone, I want that Tear for. But artifacts, the number of times this year that I've gotten nailed by a sword of X and Y, whichever one has the, I would love to have gotten rid of that artifact. There's also usually artifacts out because we're seeing a lot more treasures. Now, they'll probably sack the treasure in response, but at least you force them to sacrifice it, right?
Yeah, force them.
Use that mana on the next turn.
Force them to do it now. That's what we like to say.
Exactly.
So now the last card I want to mention when talking about the instants and sorceries actually isn't an instant or sorcery itself, but it's Ardent Elementalist, a creature from our newest Innistrad set. So Ardent Elementalist, for 3 and a red, you get a 2/1 human shaman that says when Ardent Elementalist enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And you might think this sounds very, very familiar, and that is because there is a blue creature that costs 4 mana that has an enter the battlefield effect that is not a human shaman, but a human wizard that says when it enters the battlefield, when Archaeomancer enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. So this is just a cool use of this creature, a red Archaeomancer that we finally got for our Boros or Lorehold Spellslinger decks. Very, very cool to see. And maybe there'll be some loops that we can present later on to actually constantly pump our instant sorceries back into our hand and recast them over and over again. Very cool card. Love to see it played.
And now we have a few board wipes in the deck. The first one here is Blasphemous Act, a sorcery for 8 and a red, and it says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, and it deals 13 damage to each creature. It's I don't know, in almost all cases, Blasphemous Act wipes out all creatures unless they have indestructible.
Yeah.
So continues to be a wonderful spell.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, talking about how prevalent treasures are, a card that I don't see enough with the treasure meta being what it is Vandal Blast. So Vandal Blast is a 1 red sorcery. It says destroy target artifact you don't control, but it has Overload for 4 and a red to destroy each artifact you don't control. So take out all those treasures all at the same time. Love this card.
I think one of the reasons why we hadn't seen it so much is because at one point it was like $6 or $7, but it was reprinted in Time Power Remastered. We got it in Forgotten Realms Commander and Crimson Vow Commander. So I think Vandal Blast is back at a point where I think some folks are willing to pick that up again. I know I would at that price.
Yeah.
Vandal Blast, really, really good. We see treasures all the time. And then finally we have, just a good old board wipe with a Wrath of God. You're going to pay 4 mana and you're going to destroy all creatures, and then they can't be regenerated for 2 white at sorcery speed.
Yeah, fantastic. Always got to have it in a white deck, in my opinion. I think it's probably the best board wipe in white, in my opinion. But maybe that's a loaded answer. But we were talking about how cards, from Oni's perspective, early game haymakers and preventing them. And this next card is another removal card, but the CMC is a little bit high to consider it an early game removal spell, and that's Angel of Ruins. Angel of Ruins is a 7 mana artifact creature angel, 5 white. You get a 5/7 flyer that says when Angel of Ruin enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. It does have plane cycling too, so for 2 generic mana, if it's in your hand, you can pay 2 generic mana, discard it, and go search your library for planes and put it into your hand instead. There are ways in this deck to actually reanimate creatures. Most of them float around the 4 mana value slot, like Breath of Life, Late to Dinner, and Resurrection. We will talk about those a little bit later. So that's really going to be the only way that you can actually get this card out super early is either cycling it, milling it, and then reanimating it. But it's got such a great effect to be able to just destroy 2 artifacts or enchantments on ETB. It is a creature, so Hofri is going to be able to make that token copy. So it'll be able to destroy 4 target permanents. So really, really cool card to have.
Yeah. So while the deck is fun to play, Oni said that it heavily relies on Hofri's ability to kind of make the whole deck function. So if Hofri is removed too often, it becomes 7 mana and then 9 mana. The deck can really just fold to what it's playing against. So because that's part of the deck, I guess starting with small creatures is part of the deck that come out as less of a threat. We want to make sure that folks are not focusing on Hofri. So you really want to get some creatures assembled, and then Hofri, and then a sacrifice outlet so you can kind of get the engine going. So there's a lot of sack outlets in this deck. Actually, a lot more than I was expecting to see, but since the entire deck does require ETB effects or even leave the battlefield in the event of Cavalier of Dawn, we need to make sure that we have them. So some of these altars sacrifice for no cost, some have a cost, and some do extra when you sacrifice even beyond just activating Hofri. So we're going to go through these. The first one is Altar of Dementia, an artifact for 2 colorless mana. It's a sacrifice a creature. Target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. So you can mill them, but also you're going to get that sacrifice so that you can get your creature back. That's probably going to do even more when it enters the battlefield.
Yeah, there's even you can mill your opponents. You could even mill yourself with this particular card because as we mentioned, there is some reanimation in here. So if you're at a point where you're just looking for, you have a reanimation spell in hand, you're looking for that haymaker, you might want to try milling yourself. Ashnod's Altar might be one that you're a little bit more familiar with a lot of a combo potential. That's a 3 mana artifact that says sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. The colorless mana is going to help you a lot. There's enough artifacts, there's enough high CMC creatures. We just talked about the 7 CMC Angel. This colorless mana is definitely going to do a lot of work in this deck.
Yeah, Culling Dyes, an artifact for 2 colorless. It says tap, sacrifice a creature, put a charge counter on Culling Dyes, and then you can pay 1, sacrifice Culling Dyes to draw a card for each charge counter on it. I've not seen this card take off before, but I certainly understand why you need so many sacrifice outlets here. And this is great, being a way to draw cards in white-red.
Yeah, and you got to have it. Phyrexian Altar, very similar to Ashnod's Altar, except for when you sacrifice a creature, you're adding 1 mana of any color rather than 2 colorless mana. This has a lot more potential in this deck because you can literally sacrifice your creatures and pay for any spell in the deck as long as you sacrifice enough creatures to do it.
Yeah, Phyrexian Vault, 3 mana artifact, says pay 2, tap, sacrifice a creature, draw a card. This one's great. You get to draw a card and activate Hofri all day long. Now
we get to talk about some enchantments that are actually going to be some sacrifice outlets. This particular one I had not heard of before this deck. Could just be me. Fanatical Devotion. 2 and a white, an enchantment that says sacrifice a creature, regenerate target creature. So not only is this one going to be an instant speed sack outlet that costs 0 to sack and it's repeatable, but it's also going to give you some protection for Hofri, which we know is very important here.
Yeah, regenerate is becoming more and more useful. I mean, the number of times you see Wrath of God, I think I'm seeing more board wipes based on damage than just destroy creatures. They can't be regenerated. I like this card a lot here because you can sacrifice a creature, it comes back as a spirit, but you also gave Hofri regenerate. So the next time it would die, instead of dying, you just tap it and you also, I guess, remove it from combat. Really, really strong card here. Goblin Bombardment, another pretty great card in decks that focus on sacrificing. It's an enchantment for 1 and a red that says sacrifice a creature. Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So, if life totals are dwindling and you've got enough creatures, you can sack a few, deal 1 damage to target player and take out your opponent that way. I guess you can also do it if you need to take out a problematic creature.
Absolutely. Martyr's Cause is an enchantment that I typically only see in like token wide, like token decks that go really wide. They have a ton of tokens on the field. But just as a sacrifice outlet, it's going to be really good here too. So it's a 3 mana enchantment, 2 and a white, sacrifice a creature, prevent all damage to a creature or player from one source. This also helps protect you from, getting crater hoofed by 1 creature. If someone drops a crater hoof, but they can only swing 1 creature at you or 2 creatures at you, something, you just prevent all the damage that comes from it.
Yeah, I think this is a card that could see some more play. I like this a lot. Even if you're not playing a ton of tokens, this Hofri deck, I assume is going to sack at least 3 or 4 creatures. We have played against it, so it definitely has sacrificed a few creatures. I think it's a great card. One that I also have never played with or against is Heart Piercer Manticore. So this is 2 red. For a 4/3 Manticore. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, Heart Piercer Manticore deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. It also has Embalm for 5 and a red, so you can exile it from a graveyard and make a token copy of Heartpiercer Mana Core. But it's a white zombie and also a 4/4, so that's pretty cool. I like having the option to just have one sack outlet too. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it being a creature with Embalm has the added ability of you get its normal ETB, the Hofri Spirit ETB, and then the Embalm ETB. So you get to do it 3 times, which I like. High Market is actually our only land sacrifice outlet. So High Market can tap for a colorless mana, or it can tap and sacrifice a creature to gain 1 life. Gaining 1 life really isn't that relevant, but if you gain 1 life 10 turns in a row, all of a sudden gaining 10 life is pretty darn relevant.
Yeah, I like this card a lot. And now we also have a lot of ways to sacrifice, so we might as well take advantage of this. Now, we can steal some of our opponent's creatures with this deck through Zealous Conscripts and Morton Primordial. So Zealous Conscripts is 4 and a red for a 3/3 human warrior with haste that says when Zealous Conscripts enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent until end of turn. Untap that permanent, it gains haste until end of turn. So you can play this, steal your opponent's creature, swing with that creature in the end of combat or second main phase. You can sacrifice it with whichever of these sacrifice outlets you have to not give it back to them. But on top of that, because you have Hofri, you're going to make a copy of that creature, but it's going to be a 1/1 spirit. So then you get to keep a copy, and until that copy leaves, it doesn't go back to the graveyard of your opponent, does it?
It does not.
It does not.
No.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so if you're up against like a Graveyard Matters deck or something that's trying, like if you're playing against me and I'm trying to take my Grey Merchant of Asphodel and loop it 80 times or whatever, you just have to kill it once and keep your token copy alive. It's exiled until that token copy dies. So... yeah. Very cool. And Molten Primordial is a 7 mana, 5 red avatar, 6/4 with haste. And when it enters the battlefield for each opponent, you gain control of up to 1 target creature that player controls until end of turn. So steal up to 3 creatures, kill all 3 of them, get token copies, steal another 3 creatures, kill all those, get token copies. Very cool to be able to have 6 brand new creatures just for you from 1 7-drop.
From 1 7-drop, yeah, that's actually a very cool one. Now, the ramp package in the deck is sort of low in regards to rocks, with only 7 in the deck, but only let us know that that's where Warhound and Solemn Simulacrum and the like come into play. So Loyal Warhound is a dog for 1 and a white. It's a 3/1 with Vigilance that says when it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for a basic plains and put it onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle. I like this card a lot. It reminds me of, it's white, and it does this. It's a human, not a dog.
Weathered Wayfarer or something like that. There's some Wayfarer that does.
Weathered Wayfarer's got just what I need. Lands, but no, that one's a tap. I'll think of it after, but Loyal Warhound reminds me of that card. But this is a 3/1 where the other one's just a 2/2, so I do like this one having higher power.
This deck also plays Sad Robot, as you may know it as, Solemn Simulacrum, which is a 4 generic mana 2/2 artifact creature golem that says when Solemn Simulacrum enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library, and has when Solemn Simulacrum dies, you may draw a card. So it's another one of those instances where it has both an enter the battlefield and death trigger, allowing you to draw cards in Lorehold and ramp in Lorehold, 2 things that are typically pretty difficult to do. So awesome inclusion here.
Yeah, the next one is pretty bananas, also getting very, very expensive. I guess not getting, but continuing to rise in price. Dockside Extortionist, a 1/2 Goblin Pirate for 1 and a red. When it enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. So here you might want to wait off on destroying all their artifacts and enchantments until you play your Dockside, and then play all your creatures and remove them. We saw this happen the other night. Really good stuff.
Remember to always play your Dockside after your opponent plays their Dockside.
Yeah, and then sacrifice the Dockside you made in your Hofri deck to then make another Dockside after your opponent played theirs. after you played your first one.
And now you have so much mana, you don't know what to do it with.
And you're the real winner for having that much mana.
You really are. So Archaeomancer's Map is a card that a lot of people talked about. This was printed in the Lorehold Commander deck. I don't think it's really seen as much play as as people thought it was going to see. But Archaeomancer's Map, for 3 mana, 2 and a white, you get an artifact that says when Archaeomancer's Map enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 2 basic planes, reveal them, put them into your hand, and shuffle. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player controls more lands than you, you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. So it doesn't necessarily limit you to planes to put down onto the battlefield, only when you search them for like Loyal Warhound. So you can, if you have mountains in your hands, you can play them like this. It's kind of like burgeoning in a way, but only when an opponent has more lands than you.
And I think the last 2 times we've done deck techs, this one's been in there as well. And every time we say, don't have much experience with this, I'd like to see it. So someone play some Archaeomancer's Map so I can speak to it better.
Absolutely. So now there are a few utility pieces in the deck we did allude to before that are very, very good. And that's the only description Oni gave to us about these. I think very, very good is actually an understatement for some of these. So Panharmonicon, Anointed Procession, and Reconstruct History are more than just good cards. This first one, Panharmonicon, is going to be doubling our Enter the Battlefield trigger. So for 4 generic mana, you get an artifact that says if an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So not only are we getting the original ETB doubled, but we're getting the token copy ETB doubled for a total of 4 times triggers.
Yes. Anointed Procession, an enchantment for 3 and a white. It says if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many tokens instead. Twice the tokens, twice the fun. I love it. Also
a pretty expensive card here from Amonkhet. So
yep.
We need that reprinted, Wizards of the Coast. Please and thank you. Reconstruct History is the last card in this really, really good card section. For 4 mana, you get a sorcery, 2 red and a white. It says return up to 1 target artifact, enchantment, instant, sorcery, and planeswalker from your graveyard to your hand, and then you exile Reconstruct History. So there's no planeswalkers in the deck, but the fact that you can have a 4 mana sorcery return 4 cards from your graveyard to your hand is pretty darn good. And you're going to have a lot of self-mill in here, so it's actually going to do that more often than you might think.
Right. Now, the card draw on the deck is relatively low, but it works for the deck. And so Oni said since we can use creatures multiple times due to Hofri, with things like Culling Dyes, etc., the other sack outlets, we've got some things here that we're running like Priest of Ancient Lore, a 2/1 Dwarf Cleric for 2 and a white. It says when it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life and you draw a card. So you get a little bit of card draw off of the Priest and the token that it makes. And if you've got, I guess, Anointed Procession or even Panharmonicon, you can draw even more.
And we're also looking at cards like Cathartic Pyre. So it more of the looting style. So Cathartic Pyre is a modal card. For 2 mana, you get an instant that's either going to deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, or you're going to be able to discard 2 cards and then draw up to 2 cards and draw that many cards. So you actually could discard 1.
The one creature that I like here in the card draw section that we have a Seasoned Pyromancer, a 2/2 human shaman for 1 red. When it enters the battlefield, you discard 2 cards and then draw 2 cards. And for each non-land card discarded this way, you get a 1/1 red elemental creature token. And then it also has 3 red to exile Seasoned Pyromancer from your graveyard to create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. So discard and draw. I also like the rummaging effect a lot here. And if you get multiple of them, you can just find the card you need.
And very similarly to Magus of the Wheel, you'll also see a copy of Wheel of Fortune in here. 3 mana sorcery that costs over $300 from Revise that says all players must discard their hands and then draw a new 7. And really, this is just to fuel your graveyard, all of this self-mill and all of this looting.
Right, and once you've got a lot of that in the graveyard, there are some reanimation spells in the deck to help provide more support to bring back creatures after you've either used them, or even if Hofri's not on the battlefield to really start out a combo. We've got cards like Breath of Life, Late to Dinner, and Resurrection, which are all spells that say return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Breath of Life and Resurrection cost 4 mana. Late to Dinner also gives you a food token, but all three do the exact same thing at sorcery speed.
Yeah, Felden of the Third Path is in here. Legendary creature for 3/1/1 red. You get a 2/3 that has an activated ability of 2 and a red to tap it and create a token that is an artifact that is a copy of a creature that's in your graveyard. So this only gives you instantaneous. You do have to sacrifice it at the end of the turn. You're not going to get an extra Hofri token since this one's going to start as a token, but if it's already in your graveyard, it's kind of a good way to continue to use that particular thing. So Sun Titan is also in here. I mean, everyone plays Sun Titan. Sun Titan is under 50 cents because it's been reprinted so many times, but man, is this thing still a house. For 4 white, you get a 6/6 giant with vigilance. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you can return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. A lot of times people say, well, at least I play fetch lands. I'll always be able to get a fetch land. Myriad Landscape seems to be the only self-sacrifice land in this deck, but there are 11 creatures and more importantly, 8 sack outlets that are 3 CMC or less that you can get Sun Titan out. So people are going to be removing your sack outlets. This is going to be a way to not quite protect them, but bring them back.
Yeah, we also have Fabled Passage. So there is one more land that we can get back here. Yeah, so I do like that. Fetch lands, also really great. And then we also have 2 mass reanimation spells. One is Rally the Ancestors. The other is Storm of Souls. I like Storm of Souls a lot. It's sorcery for 4 white that says return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Each of them is a 1/1 spirit with flying in addition to its other types. Exile Storm of Souls. Hofri is going to give them all trample and haste and +1/+1 if they're all spirits when they come back. So this is like a fantastic addition. And then when these die, you're going to get 1/1 versions of them that are still spirits, which I think is really funny. And then Rally the Ancestors is an instant for white, and X. You return each creature with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Exile them at the beginning of your next upkeep, and then exile Rally of the Ancestors. So if you can bring all of them back, and then you have a sack outlet, you can sacrifice them before your next upkeep, and then keep 1/1 spirit version copies of them. So very, very cool stuff.
Yeah, and when you build a board state like that from that sort of mass reanimation, you're going to be able to probably swing to win. But outside of swinging to win, there are a few more ways that this deck is built to win. And the number one, and the one that we actually lost to the other day, is the Revelark and Karmic Guide combo. So Revelark and Karmic Guide kind of combo together in that one can reanimate the other one. So Karmic Guide is a 5 mana angel spirit, has flying, protection from black. It's a 2/2. It's got echo for its same casting cost of 5, 3 white. When Karmic Guide enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Karmic Guide's sole job is going to be bringing back Revelark to the battlefield. Revelark is for 4 and a white. You get a 4/3 elemental with flying. This is when a Revelark leaves the battlefield, return up to 2 target creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It also has Evoke for 5 and a white. We're not really going to use the Evoke cost, but really what's going to happen is you're going to be looping Revelark to return Karmic Guide and one other creature that has power 2 or less, and then Karmic Guide is going to bring back Revelark, and you're going to constantly either bringing back the same creature over and over again with a sacrifice outlet that has 2 power or less, or you're going to get all of your creatures with 2 power or less onto the battlefield to build a nice board state for yourself.
Yeah, there's a couple of loops here. One is, so the creatures we mentioned before, some of them are part of these combos. So you can return Ardent Elementalist to get all of your instants and sorceries back to your hand. If you're looping with Dockside Extortionist, you can end up potentially just getting infinite mana with a lot of treasures. And Duplicate will allow you to exile all of your opponent's creatures.
Yeah, we mentioned Duergar Hedge Mage, which is going to destroy all artifacts and enchantments as long as you control the right amount of mountains and plains. Mindclaw Shaman is going to be casting all instants and sorceries from your opponent's hand. So Mindclaw Shaman is a 6 mana 2/2 that when it enters
5 mana 2/2.
Oh, I'm sorry, 5 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you can look at target player's hand and then cast an instant or sorcery from their hand for free. You loop it over and over, cast all of the instants and sorceries from all of your opponent's hands. Priest of the Ancient Lore, we mentioned when it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life and you draw a card. You could draw your entire deck this way, which is really cool. Do the same thing with Solemn Simulacrum. Seasoned Pyromancer will allow you to loot your entire deck. But even on top of that, if your sacrifice outlet that you have out there is Goblin Bombardment, you don't even need another creature. You can just win with Revelark and Karmic Guide and just ping everyone down to death with Goblin Bombardment.
Right, and if you have a Terror of the Peaks out, which is a 5/4 dragon with flying for 3 red, it says spells your opponents cast that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast, so it's harder to remove. And then it says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. So if you're really doing these loops with Karmic Guide and Revelark and Terror of the Peaks is out, you're just going to ping everyone. And it's really a sight to see, because in the pile that Oni was reanimating, Terror of the Peaks was coming back. Mm-hmm. So it was lights out for us. So this is actually a really, really cool deck. I love these reanimation decks. I think there is so much synergy, and I personally build around my commanders more often than I don't. So I like seeing other commander decks that they function, when their commander's out. But this one even has a backup plan that if Hofri is removed once or twice or 3 times, because I wouldn't be surprised if someone removed it a 3rd time,
for sure.
That there is still an option. There are some commander decks that fold if their commander is just removed too many times. And this one's pretty resilient. So like always, we like to suggest some cards that we would add if we were playing with this deck. And actually, this one's kind of an off-the-wall one that I like, and I think both sides work really well, which is Mila, Crafty Companion, and the flip side is Luca, Wayward Bonder. So Mila is a 2/3 fox for 1 white. The first part of it, when an opponent attacks one or more planeswalkers you control, put a loyalty counter on each planeswalker, isn't really relevant in this deck because there aren't any planeswalkers. But it says whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you can draw a card, which I think is really great. But if you play it on the commander side with Luca, it has 2 abilities that I think are relevant. The plus one is you can discard a card, and if you do, you draw a card. But if you discard a creature this way, you get to draw 2 cards instead. So that's pretty cool, because we do have some creatures that we want to get into our graveyard. And then also the -2 to return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, and then you exile it at your next upkeep. You can bring it back, swing with it for combat, sacrifice it so it doesn't get exiled at the beginning of your next upkeep, and then you get a copy of it that's a 1/1 spirit. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a fantastic combo. I like that a lot. I like, him being from Ikoria, Luca, I have to talk about another Ikoria card here in Luminous Broodmoth. Luminous Broodmoth being a 4-mana, 2 white insect, 3/4 with flying. This is whenever a creature you control without flying dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a flying counter on it. So this is just going to be another way to get another enter the battlefield. Only 7 of the 26 creatures in this deck have flying currently. So for the other 19 creatures, this is just another way to get another enter the battlefield or death trigger for your creatures.
Right. Another card that I like here a lot, and it synergizes really well with the deck, is from Zendikar Rising. The set with non-stop fiery goodness is Kazul's Fury, an instant for 2 and a red that says as an additional cost to cast the spell, you sacrifice a creature, which we want to do in this deck, and it deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target, but it's a land on the other side, so you can actually follow Coyle's advice and just remove a land.
There you go.
Add the spell in, which I did do. I, in fact, removed a basic land of the color. Now, we do need mountains for, Duergar, Headmage, and other spells, so maybe not that one, but I think this is a great inclusion. I like this card.
Now, who would I be if I didn't mention my namesake of a Worm Coil engine here? But let me tell you, this card actually it would be a house, especially in combination with like your Anointed Procession types effects. So Worm Coil engine is a 6 generic mana artifact creature worm, 6/6 that has both Death Touch and Lifelink. And when it dies, you actually get 2 tokens. They're both 3/3 worms. One has Death Touch and one has Lifelink. So with Hofri, it doesn't matter what the Worm Coil, it doesn't say like half of the Worm Coil engine's power goes to one token and the other. So even your 1/1 Worm Coil engine token that you get from Hofri is going to be making 2 3/3 tokens when it dies. With Anointed Procession, you're talking about getting like a board of 12 of these 3/3 tokens, and it can go pretty crazy. I'm just saying, you could play it.
The next one here, because we know that there's a combo-centric piece to this deck, another card that I would add, which is very similar to a card that's currently in the deck, is a Coercive Recruiter. This is my last suggestion here, a 4/3 Orc Pirate for 4 and a red. It says when it enters the battlefield, or another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, you gain control of target creature until end of turn, untap it. Until end of turn, that creature gains haste and also becomes a pirate in addition to its other types. So this is very much like the Zealous Conscripts we mentioned, which was a 3/3 with haste, but same mana value. It doesn't turn things into a pirate, and the difference really is that Zealous Conscripts has haste itself, where Coercive Recruiter doesn't. The thing that I like about this a lot is the fact that we have the ability to make additional tokens with that Anointed Procession. So if you play a Coercive Recruiter and you do sacrifice it to Hofri and you make 2 Coercive Recruiters, the way that these work is you wouldn't just take 2 creatures like you would, or 1 with the Zealous Conscripts. Coercive Recruiters see each other, so you're going to take 2 additional creatures. So you would steal 4, because each of them is going to steal 2. And then if you have ways, if someone plays something crazy on the battlefield that makes everybody get additional creatures or additional tokens, which I have seen plenty of times now, Coercive Recruiter can actually go pretty crazy. And then you can sacrifice all your opponent's creatures that you've stolen. So another option. I think Coercive Recruiters is such a good card. And being 29 cents, super affordable.
Yeah, no, amazing. Commander Legends, please. We're getting another Commander Legends this year.
Yes, maybe.
So now this next suggestion might not be for everybody, but specifically for Oni, we know that in this particular deck, you're okay with running infinite combos because we see your Revelark and Karmic Guide. So there is actually an infinite combo specifically with Hofri Ghostforge that is not included in this deck currently, revolving around the card Mist Moon Griffin. So Mist Moon Griffin is a 4 mana Griffin for 2. That's 2 power, 2 toughness. So 3 and a white. It's flying. And when Mist Moon Griffin dies, exile Mist Moon Griffin, then return the top creature card of your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can actually kill Mist Moon Griffin with a sacrifice outlet with Hofri out there. And Mist Moon Griffin doesn't actually have to exile itself in order for its last ability to completely resolve. So by sacrificing Mist Moon Griffin and getting a token copy of Mist Moon Griffin, you can then sacrifice that token copy of Mist Moon Griffin, get the real copy of Mist Moon Griffin into your graveyard, and then return your real copy of Mist Moon Griffin back to the graveyard, back to the battlefield with its original Mist Moon Griffin trigger. So this goes infinite with any particular sack outlet. So depending on what sack outlet you have is just depending on how you're going to win the game, really. Goblin Bombardment is going to ping all your opponents to death. Ashnod's Altar is going to give you infinite colorless mana. Phyrexian Altar gives you infinite colored mana. And Altar of Dimension mills out all of your opponents. So Oni, since you are okay with running infinite combos in this deck, I would suggest finding a place for Mist Moon Griffin.
I would like to lose to a card that goes infinite and says return the top creature in your graveyard to the battlefield, because I've never dealt with the order of my graveyard before. Most of my decks don't care, but this deck was a lot of fun to go over. Oni, thank you so much for being a patron. We had a great time putting this episode together. And if you are interested in having an episode done for one of your decks, again, head over to patreon.com. And you can check out our tiers, and one of them will feature your deck. That is it for this week. You can find me on Twitter at Andy Flory if you want to reach out to me.
And you can find me on Twitter at WormCoilEngine. We want to give a special thanks to Ryan Nichols, our producer and editor. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And Chris Wolf, who handles all of our graphic design. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And I guess until next week, we'll chat with you then.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.